and that will be sent out probably later on this afternoon. Attached to that recording is going to be a survey. So those active students and alumni that might be attending today, keep an eye out for that. It should take you no more than 2 minutes to fill out the survey. We value your opinion as students and alumni here at WGU, so certainly welcome that feedback, but also anything that Josué covers today, you can go back, reference in the recording, which I would recommend doing. The chat is open, so there will be a designated Q&A at the end of the session. So feel free if you want to post those questions into the chat. If you feel that you want to come off mute and ask your question, we just raise your hand, we'll call on you, and then you can take yourself off mute and ask away. But from here, what I'm going to do is shift gears a little bit. Josué, are you ready to roll?
Yep, ready to go.
Awesome. So it's my pleasure to introduce Josué. Josué, if you wanted to just introduce yourself, what your current job title is, what organization that you work for, and what degree did you earn from WGU?
Absolutely. So, like you said, Josué Reyna, currently serving as the Chief Communications Officer with the Poway Unified School District, which is in northern San Diego County in Southern California. And WGU, I did a Bachelor of Science in Business Management, Master of Science in Management and Leadership, and then an MBA.
And obviously, you enjoyed your time at WGU if we went back and dipped into the pool three separate times.
Yeah, absolutely. Best experience for sure.
Awesome. I'd love to know a little bit about, what were you doing career-wise prior to your current position, maybe prior to WGU? So just a little background on you, and then what inspired you to pursue your current career path?
So I've almost always been in education, with the exception of like 2 years after high school that I was at Starbucks as a barista. But after that, I was in public education. My mom was in public education on the administrative support side. And so that's kind of just where I always was career wise. And, like many of our WGU friends, I tried college, didn't work out immediately. But then once I found WGU, a friend told me about it, and then tried it out. I'm like, no, this is it. This is how I learn. This is how I know how to do secondary secondary education. And so I stayed working in public education uh, while I completed my degrees. And I was on the special ed side of the house. I was working as an instructional assistant, one on one with a kid, had a full individualized education program and or plan, and kind of just worked my way. I never say I worked my way up, I always say I worked my way across the district, and eventually found myself working for the superintendent as an executive assistant in the superintendent's office. And so through that experience, got to work with very many different executives in many different educational leaders and elected officials as well. And so kind of being in that space, really getting to see what a large system looks like, a large system that is trying to educate and just care for children. Um, it kind of, that's kind of where it clicked, and it said like, okay, this is the space that I want to be in. It was a nice combination of meaningful work plus hard work, right? I wasn't looking for an easy job or an easy career or a paycheck. It was, I want the challenge, but I want it to mean something. So that's kind of how I ended up where I ended up. More specifically with the role that I'm in now, kind of started more on the internal communications and community engagement side. And so really looking to um, how do we speak to and hear from large audiences internally, and what does that look like and how is that effective? And then how do we engage partners who are not internal, but partners that, come around our students, How do we engage them in meaningful ways, right? And bring their voice to the conversation. And then as that kind of developed, the public relations side came in, and now and the marketing side came in, the communication, crisis communication side, media relations, all that fun stuff that comes with
And I'd imagine uh, starting in a school district, that's something that you wanted to continue to work within the school system. And I think when we talk to our populations and we mention working in a school district, they instantly think, okay, you have to be a teacher. So something a little bit outside of the box, something a little bit different. Is that something that when you first started, like you foresaw yourself kind of shifting gears, or did it just kind of evolve over time?
Yeah, when I started as an instructional assistant, I was in while I was assigned to one student, his inclusion program meant he was in a general education setting, which means I was in the classroom where there was a general ed teacher. And many times the teachers would tell me, like, hey, you should go become a teacher, right? Get your degree, get your certification, your credential, and become a teacher. And I did. I liked it. I enjoyed it. I enjoy instructional pedagogy and things like that. What I learned as I moved throughout my career is, as much as I love the teaching side, I love more of the um, influencing an entire system, right? And so while I was a one-on-one instructional assistant in a classroom at that school, I was also very much leading the technology side of things, the educational technology side of things, because I loved the ability to influence and implement systems for the entire school, right? As I moved into district offices, it became not just for one school, but for 50 schools, for over 40,000 students at the time. And so that really appealed so much more as to, again, it's mobilizing, larger groups. It's influencing. I always, when I talk to folks or do different presentations, I always say, like, leadership and influence are like synonyms, right? They're essentially the same thing. And so being able to influence from whatever corner of the organization you're in, that was the appeal for me. And to do that in a way that actually supported educators. And so while I was not looking to be the one in front of the classroom, I wanted to be the one that surrounded the classroom with all the support it needed from that communication side, right? And so sometimes that means, media relations, working with the media in a way that tells the right story about our schools and our students and our staff, in a way that doesn't wreak havoc on our community. Um, a lot of that, the times, is through proactive marketing, right? So and it's really after the goal of protecting the classroom, protecting that instructional time. Teachers, you focus on your kids. You got them right in front of you. Let me do the part that kind of shields you from any unnecessary negative public relations.
And I love that, especially your point on just like the overall reach. I don't think people realize how much of a reach that is. Um, was there something specific? Maybe it was a specific moment, or maybe it was an experience that really solidified, like, all right, I do love what I do. This is something that I do have a passion for. Was there a specific moment that maybe like really hit you and made you fall in love with what you're currently doing?
Maybe not a moment. It was several moments over time, but I would say it was definitely people. And so I was surrounded by leaders who really were mentors, and were more than anything patient, patient enough to, work with me in my big naive ideas, right? And lots of sarcasm that came with it. Uh, but it was more about people than moments, that I learned a lot from many different leaders, right? Everybody has different styles, everybody brings different strengths. And so to be able to observe leaders who are effective. I won't say good, I'll say they were effective, you know. And so being able to observe them and learn from them, and then talk to them and say, hey, tell me how you did that. Tell me what you were going after. Tell me, the what was the reasoning behind your decision? Big decisions, bold decisions, tough decisions. Um, and I think in those conversations, I began to fall in love with the idea of organizational strategy. I mean, right out the gates in my degree program, one of my favorite classes that I remember is organizational development. Like I love that stuff. My the Master of Science in Management and Leadership program, but out of all three degrees, that one's probably my favorite. And I keep coming back and I'm asking WGU, when's the doctorate program going to kick? Yeah, Alonzo knows I always ask, when's the doctorate program coming? Uh, but really, it was, there's a couple of signals that you get um, when you begin, when you stop working and you start living in your purpose, right? I know that sounds very like pie in the sky, but like there really is a difference. And I found that, I would be in this flow state where I could spend tons of hours researching and developing these plans, but then bringing them to the people who they're meant to serve and then say, does this work? Can we implement this? Right. And so that was through, strategic initiatives, that was through leadership development. I mean, so many different ways of getting to people to move the system or to create a better system. But at the end of the day, it's about the student outcomes. So I won't I can't teach a student math. I can't teach them how to read, but I can work with those who are in charge of the teachers that are teaching them, right? And so it really is learning who's within your sphere of influence. And I learned that through mentors and leaders that knew how to not overextend, but say, here's who I get to work with. Let me work there. And then in a way that it's going to have a ripple effect and it will reach the classroom. It will reach the student. It will reach the family.
And you are certainly not alone about questions with the doctoral programs. I get that across the schools with different alumni that we interact with. So hopefully at some point here we venture into that. I did want to go back a little bit, and you had touched on it bits and pieces, but ultimately, why did you choose WGU, and what are some things that maybe you've utilized or leveraged since earning your different degrees? And I'm sure for you, getting three different ones, I'm sure you utilize specific aspects of them in certain parts of your career, but ultimately, what made the decision? Yes, I'm going to pursue this degree from WGU, and how have you utilized some of those degrees?
Well, I didn't know about WGU until a friend told me about it. And then once I looked into it, all the factors that we're all familiar with, the affordability, the flexibility, the delivery of instruction. I mean, all of those things really made sense for me. And in order to say that, I have to make sense of what came before that. And so part of my story that I always openly share with folks, I mean, you'd think there'd be some like shame or embarrassment around it, but I own it. Was that in high school, I was doing okay. I wasn't an amazing student, but I was doing fine. But then my senior year, my language arts teacher was like, "Yeah, you're not passing this class," because I wouldn't do a what is it, like a portfolio, and a senior portfolio or something like that. And that's just not that. One, the resources required to do it, right? To buy all the materials, and then to buy the materials to make it look like what all the other kids had. It's not something that was accessible for us, for my family, and we had our priorities elsewhere in what we did apply our resources to. And so didn't pass the class. You know, Parents were devastated because it meant I had to do this class over the summer. So I graduated high school, but I just graduated in the summer. Um, Little did I know, alternative education would just be my jam, you know. It, and I think, but I went straight into a university after that, and then it wasn't working. It wasn't working out. I couldn't make it happen for some reason. So then some other family circumstances really forced me to get working full time. And so I did that. But then I had, again, a mentor, a leader who I worked for that upon her retirement, we're walking out on her last day of work, and we're walking down the staircase, and she stops half, like, one landing before we get to the first floor, and she turns around and she says, "You need to go back to school." She's like, "I'll walk myself to the car. You need to go back to school." Eh, You know, uh, I said, "Okay," message received, and so WGU had come up at that point, and I said, "Okay, let's do this." Um, what I learned was the ability to go at my own pace. Um, and by pace, I know many people equate that with you can speed through. It's not so much the speed through, it's the let me dive in where I want to dive in, right? I get that there's these competencies, but there are some areas that I'm going to want to just go down a rabbit hole because the topic is so intriguing. And then to have access to a course mentor or a course instructor, to be able to just sign up for time with them to say, "Hey, can you tell me a little bit more about, like, that was just a whole different experience." And it allowed me to take the reins and take ownership of my own learning. And that it was something I didn't have before. And so, hence why I went back for the other two degrees. It made it made more sense for me, for sure. What was amazing too was just how the learning really complemented the work I was doing. And so I always feel like there would be a project or an initiative that would come up at work, and it just happened to coincide with a performance assessment or something that I had going on in one of my courses. So that whether that was, coincidental or just by design, I'm not sure, but it really helped to deepen the learning that I was receiving, and make the learning that much more meaningful rather than just rote memory and things like that.
And I think that just speaks to so many people that end up coming to WGU, like a similar type of circumstance. Like, your more traditional schools, just it wasn't working. So searching for that
Hmm.
alternative, and it just, I think, being able to really work at your own pace, to what you're saying, and actually have the program really apply to what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. Like, I think that just keeps people much more motivated to get through. um, Another thing you've mentioned a couple times, and I want to touch on it, and just the importance of mentorship. How did you come across some mentors that you've had? How have they impacted you and maybe influenced some of your decisions as you've kind of navigated your career?
Uh, Thankfully, the leaders and executives I've worked with have most of them have just naturally been mentors. That's just part of their makeup. And I was feel really blessed to have worked with them, and to this day keep in contact with many of them. um, but also there is a very intentional, part of the associations I joined. I'm part of the National School Public Relations Association, the California School Public Relations Association, Public Relations Society of America, some school administrator associations and things like that. And a big uh, motive for doing so there's is twofold. One is to give back, right? Give back to the field, give back to those who are doing the work with you in a different setting, possibly, but still doing the same work. But the other side is to find those mentors. You accelerate your own learning when you can match up with someone who can bring a fresh perspective, who could bring a different lens, um, who can offer just a different way of thinking about how to tackle a problem or how to address a situation. Um, and so there, over the years, it's been more intentional. Early on, it was just, I guess, by luck. Um, and I still remember, I don't know if we're allowed to share names here, but Susan Turpin was my program mentor for my master's program, and she was a rock star. I mean, just every check-in, she was asking the right questions. She was, um, she would make these really good points about, like, making it simple about taking the next step to make sure I'm on track and stuff. So, shout out to Susan. She was phenomenal.
And I'm sure she would appreciate a little shout out. So we'll give her shine here. Um, what what do you love most about your current role, and what keeps you motivated, engaged as you go through your day to day?
I always tell folks I'm a nerd when it comes to strategic planning. I absolutely love strategic planning, and probably in a way that's unhealthy, but still productive. Um, I think building organizational strategic plans. I don't know what the draw is, but that is probably one of the things that I love the most. And if strategic planning were a major, my concentration would be in communication strategic planning, because it's okay. Here's the big thing of what we're trying to do. Okay, now go let people know, and the way you talk to folks, the way you talk to your internal and external audiences also has to be very strategic, and also has to have lots of thought behind it, and lots of intention behind it, lots of data and research behind it. And so I really feel that is probably what I love the most, is to be able to build a framework, build a plan to say, this is how we are going to influence behavior. It's just that's what it comes down to. You're influencing people's behavior in a way that's pretty powerful, because they may have never met you. You know, they this district specifically, I think, is around 4,500 employees. So how do you get 4,500 employees to move in the same direction, to speak the same language? You know, here comes the communications team to get us there. And so that to me is exciting. It's making that big impact, making that big splash. That's where you start to realize that your work is meaningful, and it feels awesome. I really stay motivated by remembering the students, because that's where I started. I saw the impact of big decisions on individual lives, and so when I can, I try to visit school sites, and I'm here in the district office, but I try to visit our school sites as much as possible, to see those faces, to see these are the people that you are clocking in and clocking out for, right? These are the humans that need you to do your job well. And so that really helps to stay motivated, especially for our populations who are underserved, or our populations whose learning abilities just don't fit the traditional, well, how what curriculum was traditionally designed for.
The next question that I have, looking ahead, what are some things that maybe you're working on or that excites you as you move forward here? Maybe it's over the next year, the next 5 years, maybe the next 10 years in your current role.
Well, I think that the research and literature on leadership has exploded, like truly just exploded, right? Um, it, it, that, and I think maybe parallel to it, this is me just guessing, that, that, and at the same time, the trend or concept of coaching, and to see those two come together, I think eventually it's gonna get the traction to where those two things are just so uh, um, tied together in a way that makes for truly effective leadership. And I remember in the management and leadership program, um, there was having to review all the different leadership theories, right? And it's so funny, because you look at them and you realize, well, at the end of the day, we're all human, and humans are messy. And while there's always going to be great frameworks, great tips, great skill sets, that leaders have, nothing quite fully prepares you for the messiness that we bring, whether it's to work, to our community, to our you know houses of faith, to our politics, right? I mean, we are messy, and these leadership skills absolutely help us. Um, but they don't fully prepare us until we're in the work, and then that's where you really get to roll your sleeves up and realize you're not leading projects. You're leading people, right? You're not trying to achieve targets. You're trying to essentially build community. You're trying to build folks up. Because if you're not doing that, then what are you doing, right? Like big picture, what are you doing? And so I think as more research and literature comes out on these two topics of leadership and coaching, I really am excited to see what that's going to do for the next generation of leaders, what they're going to walk in with already loaded with, the other side of it, especially from the communication side of things, is, uh, we expected social media when it came out to be a place that really connected people, right? You can now connect with someone across the globe or around the globe. Um, and I don't think that's what we're seeing exactly now. We see parts of it, but more than anything, what we see is connecting with others who are like us. And when we think about being able to build community, it's it's not, the goal is not, let me go find more people that think like me and that look like me and that act like me and that talk like me. That's not going to be the community that thrives the most. It's going to be the one that says, let me invite different thoughts, let me just invite different, right? And so while social media helps you to find more of the same, one of the things that I'm looking forward to is how, as marketers, as communicators, as influencers, how do we start to shift into this idea of infusing so much empathy into our exchanges, whether that exchange is digitally, whether it's like this, on online, via video, whether it's in person. How do we show up with a level of empathy? And I really think I'm going to just trail for a little bit here. I hope you don't mind, but we are riding this wonderful trend of highly customized, highly individualized marketing, and just content, right? I mean, who would have thought when email first came out, you can send now an email to thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people, and have it be, have their name on it, right? I mean, it's crazy, like to think, you can receive an email that feels so personalized, and that's great. I think it's a great advancement in the field. Um, let's let's together navigate away from turning that into a machine that just generates like selfishness and self-serving, and instead, how do we go into otherness? How do we see others? Like, I'm glad this is tailored for me, but is this going to make sense for my community? Is this going to make sense for my group? Is it going to, you know what I mean? And so having that collective mindset. And so when we show up to exchanges, it's not about me, myself, and I, although our natural instincts are to stay safe, to take care of ourselves first. How do we start to infuse that empathy into our communications, into our marketing, into our advertising, into our media, in a way that says, I'm walking into this with an open mind that there may be a different perspective, that there may be a different way to think about this. I'm going to start there, not hopefully get there, but that's where I'm starting. And so all that is very lofty thinking about how, years out, where we might get, how social media exchanges and online exchanges and interpersonal exchanges might look differently. This is showing up with empathy first.
I can't tell you how much I love that entire response and the
Did I go
feedback
too
that we're.
far?
No, that was amazing. We'll be clipping that up a ton moving forward, and using that. But I know some people had some comments in the chat on that response. So thank you for sharing that and those insights. The last question that I have, and then what we'll do is open it up for questions of those that are attending. how might somebody go about getting into or getting to the point to become a chief communications officer? Is there a recommended route that you say, hey, this might be a path? Is it really just unconventional and you find your way there? I'm sure, people just graduating, that's probably not the position that they're like, hey, that's exactly what I want to be doing here moving forward. So what are some recommendations that you might have if people are interested in one, learning more, or potentially pursuing that career path?
Yeah, well, so I would maybe start by saying uh, pursuing the career, tread with caution. It's not for the faint of heart, and that's not to toot my own horn in any way, but it really is. There are some challenges, just like with every job. And I had again a mentor, a friend that wisely told me that at this point, it's no longer about the salary or the title; it's about who you get to work with, because you're going to be in some messy situations. You're going to be in some tricky situations where you do have to share bad news, or you do have to make some very tough decisions. And what matters more than the title, than the salary, is who's going to be standing there with you when you have to make those calls, who's going to be sitting next to you when you have to field all the questions from the news. I mean, media relations is such a big part of communications. And you know when those interviews kind of get a little shaky, who can you come back to the office to, and know that you can trust them, and things like that, right? That it begins to be more about who do you get to work with, more than what career you end in. So I would say just keep that in mind for any role in any career. Um, with that said, the trajectory, the roadmap into the chief communications officer role is not a clean, straight path. That's for sure. I have so many colleagues in this role, and specifically in education, in public education, that are come from so many different backgrounds. You have folks that came um, from media broadcast background. You have folks that came from a journalism background. You have folks that have come from a nonprofit background. Actually, it's a little bit more rare to find a teacher who ended up in communications in education, right? They traditionally take another path of principalship and director, and then on the educational services side of the house. This is a very unique role that invites a lot of other backgrounds. um, I have friends that in the role, that have background in government, right? That have background in the private sector as well. And so it's just it. I would say there's no one clean path. It does take a lot of, as with any organization, it takes a lot of learning of what is the to use a chat GPT word, what is the landscape of education, of K-12 education. Um, but I mean, really, there's so many, I think so many different industries and career paths offer a different strengths to this role specifically.
Fantastic. And I like that there is no one set path to get there. And I think it ties into being able to market yourself and say, here's my skill set, here's how it applies to this specific role, and selling somebody on that for that specific position. But I want to thank you, Josué, for just sharing your story. What I want to do from here, I want to open it up to the audience. If you had specific questions that you were looking to ask, and it can be about anything, feel free to post those in the chat. Or if you wanted to come off mute and ask your question, we just ask, raise your hand, we'll call on you. As people are kind of formulating some of those questions, just a reminder, the session is being recorded and that will be sent out. Also attached to the recording will be that survey, so just make sure that you're taking the time to fill out that survey. But any questions that anybody might have, we'd love to get some questions into the chat, or raise your hands. I'll give people a second to kind of formulate those. But Josué, thank you so much for jumping in today. We certainly appreciate it. That was fantastic.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to be here. Happy to be here. I know I do have a online board where I just have pinned and collected so many resources from the three different degree programs that I do go back and visit frequently.
I love it. Diane, we'll start with you.
Hi, Jose. Good to hear your story, and I'm just
Hey,
so
Diane.
inspired about you loving your career, and just thank you for your time today. I have a quick question is I know you're not the only one in your family that has gone to WGU, and I'm not sure if you shared that yet, but what um, inspired you or them to also go to WGU?
Yeah, so I first of all, I always tell folks, I get to do a lot of professional development in this role and in previous roles, and I always tell folks it's never late to go back to school. And I share with them my WGU experience and tell them like if I could do it, you could do it. Many times these are adults who have been told like it's too late to go back. But I share that with them. One of those people that I shared that with, which is perfect for Valentine's week and the Love Your Career week, is my wife. And so she had a similar story. We both had kind of given into this narrative of like, okay, like college is just not for you. And but once I had kind of gone through the program, I was able to tell her like, no, that's not true. We can actually do this. So she just last August went to the commencement ceremony and she graduated with her bachelor's in healthcare administration, I believe. And it was so much fun cheering her on along the way. And I'm like, no, 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 just go talk to your mentor, go talk to her, or sign up with the course instructor. And so it was fun. It was our first graduation ceremony because, fun fact, I didn't, in those three degree programs, I actually never attended a graduation ceremony. Um, and so going to hers was like going to my first one. Although it was hers, it was there in Utah, and oh my gosh, it was amazing, amazing. And so to see her cross that stage, she was, near the end of the names called, and I just see these two pink heels come out, onto the stage, and super proud of her. But it was we had again both had come from backgrounds where we felt like this wasn't an option for us, and so to be able to counter that narrative, right? I mean, it's just been phenomenal, amazing, amazing. Thank you, Diane, for the question.
Thank you for sharing. It's even better than what I I don't I think last time we talked you hadn't both walked yet. So it just gave me chills thinking about that. I'm encouraging my husband to go too, so I'm gonna have to share this story with him next.
It is recorded, Diane, so we can clip that up and send it your way.
There you go. There you go.
I love it.
And it's been pretty cool to get feedback from folks. Like the previous role that I was in when I was leaving, I got a handful of emails that said, "Hey, while you were here, I went back to school because of what you shared." And I always say like, "Good, I'm glad." Like I'm just one story of many. Like you have your own to tell. Go back to school and figure out what your story is. And finish that story. So it's always awesome to I guess in the theme of this webinar series to go from loving your school to love your career, right? To be able to have that story play out in your life is it's something else. Truly a blessing for sure.
And I'll be honest, most alumni that we talk with like share that similar feeling, and it makes it so much easier to have some of these conversations because there is that passion for the education that you go through, and it's easily relatable too. Like life happens, so there's certain circumstances that come up and make it a challenge. So I mean, those ways, just you sharing your story of, hey, this is how I started, here are the 3 degrees that I earned from WGU. Like that's going to end up paving the way for somebody else to kind of take that step. And maybe they did just, they got 1 degree from WGU and they're like, maybe I should go back. Like that provides them with that assurance that, hey, somebody else has already gone down this path before. Like it's something that I can also obtain to be able to progress in my career. So again, just sharing your story and kind of providing those insights are going to be instrumental for somebody, whether they're attending this live or they go back and they're watching the recording 6 months from now. Like it really, it will impact people. So certainly thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Any other questions for Josué? And one just came in, working in both education and communications. I'm curious how you and your team have been dealing with current politics surrounding education, especially on the federal level.
Oh, I was waiting for this question to come up actually. There's a couple of different approaches to, and I'm sorry, I don't have the name of whoever asked it, but awesome question. There's a couple of things in this role to consider, right? And one is the well-being of your staff and checking in with your team. And so we have a small but mighty team here. And I think it's first that pulse, finger on the pulse of like, how's everybody doing? Because you want people to be well before they can go and do well. And so checking to see how is this making you feel, and just finding your folks where they're at. And then from there, the strategy that comes into play, you really have to think long term, and really think about how to respond versus react, those types of things, how to not invite national narratives in a way that then imposes them on your local community, right? And so I really think that it, in this role, and then together with my colleagues, it's tempering that for our audiences and being able to say, yeah, that's a terrible headline. Let's look at our families. Again, what's our sphere of influence? What's within our span of control? These are our families, these are our students. What's going on here? And so sometimes we see these, alarming headlines and assume that it's happening everywhere, and we just know that that's not how it works with media. And so being able to translate and interpret media tactics, and to be able to interpret legislation, right? To be able to kind of uh, uh, find a through line and look through what are all the intended consequences for your groups, for your students, for your families, for your staff. And I don't do that by myself. You start to tap into your resources. We have different associations that we partner with to figure out what are the financial implications, what are the educational code implications, right? Which law stands, which doesn't, those types of things, and then to be able to package that in a way that reaffirms commitment to your families. For us, it's families, right? That we're here to support all students. That's what we do, and that's what we're called to do legally is to educate all students. And so when we see headlines that start to trend, that start to scare, that start to alarm, we really help to temper that. And while we may craft a response that says that that speaks to who our organization is, right? We're a public education institution that serves all students. There's a lot of work that's done leading up to those. Not that we know that those top level decisions are being made at the federal level. That not that we know those in advance, but there's things that we do with our different audiences so that when they see these executive orders or whatever that come out, and if it's if it causes them fear, and then when we speak back, we are a trusted voice for them. And to become a trusted voice for our families, for our students, for our staff, that doesn't happen in a reaction. It happens way in advance. You've already been communicating. You've already been building those relationships. You've already been in conversation with your groups, and that is probably one of my favorite parts about the public relations side of the house, is that it is exactly what it sounds like. It is working on your relationship with your public, whoever that public may be. And just like, and again, to go back to the theme of the week with Valentine's Day, in a marriage, in a relationship, you don't have a conversation only when it's necessary or mandatory, right? There's conversations that happen in between, in pockets. There's exchanges that happen along the way to those bigger conversations that build a relationship, that cultivate the relationship, that really build this glue, or create a glue, so that you understand, when I say this, it means that, and when I hear you say this, it means that. And in a way, our public relations side of our efforts is having those smaller moments with our groups, those smaller exchanges, so that when those big moments come, we can speak, and the reception of our messaging is accelerated because there's trust there, right? There's already a built-in relationship in which we can communicate more effectively. And when I say communicate, it includes the hearing back from, not just the "we told you." It's the we're in conversation. We're in a exchange here. So I don't know if that answered the question, but that's my best answer for now.
Certainly answered, and trust. And Ezra, thank you for asking that question. Ezra said that is so well said. Trust is huge, and we have seen so many brands lose trust in their audiences. So I think that is huge. Is making sure that you are building that trust and maintaining that, and doing that with great open-end communication, and being able to communicate with the community, I think, is huge.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions that people might have? And there we go. Can you generalize how you would explain to people what your MSML degree is and how it aligns with various role vacancies? I find this degree to be a bit unfamiliar to people.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Oh, that I actually just had a friend who works in education, in communications within education, and she just started her MSML program. And um, when I was talking to her about it, I said, "Look, it's like the consultant's degree in a sense. It's the organizational consultant's degree, because you get, again, the organizational psychology, the organizational development, the leadership development, but you also get the tools to how to approach conversations within an organization, how to be that person that can come in with a solution oriented mindset and skill set, right? You want those two things together. And so I think that MSML program really sets you up with that, to be able to say, there's a solution out there, we just need to get after it, and here's the skills to facilitate those conversations. I've noticed that so many of the frameworks and tools, it never works when you say, I'll take a simple one, a SWOT analysis. It never works when you say you need to do a SWOT analysis, right? No, that just doesn't work. But when you come into a group that you don't necessarily, you're not supervising, but you need to be able to get them somewhere, kind of indirect leadership with the group, to be able to come in and know how to facilitate a conversation, that's a whole different skill set. And I really think that that's what MSML program gives you, is here is the world's largest tool belt of ways you can facilitate different conversations, whether it's managing a crisis, whether it's managing a reorganization, whether it's managing a startup, or just leading change, right? That's one of the books that's out there. That's part of that program. It sits on my shelf, leading change. All those pieces, that an organization goes through in a life cycle. That program really equips you to speak to those stages, so that you become, it's not no longer are you relevant to the organization in its current stage. No, give me any stage, I'll be relevant to it. I have the tools and knowledge needed to handle it.
next question, and you briefly just mentioned a piece of it. Can you share any books or resources that you found influential in your career?
Sure. Uh, I'll name three. Uh, One of the books that I carry, and I think it was from the MSML program or the MBA program, one of the two. It's the Full Range Leadership Development by Young and Sosik, I think is what it is. And I carry that book with me everywhere. I don't read it everywhere I go, but I just, it's like a comfort blanket, right? That book, I think, has probably the for me is probably one of the best books out there on leadership. Um, so there's that one. I would say I'm also a certified strength coach through Gallup, and so their Clifton Strengths Assessment and the work around it, the book around it, for me is awesome because it really gives a different approach as to how you lead and how you manage. And then my third one, I think, and I'll full disclaimer, it is somewhat faith based. But it's by Tim Keller, and I want to say it's called the meaning, not meaning of work. It's something about work. Um, Every Good Endeavor, I think, is what it's called. And what my takeaway from that book really is about my philosophy for work, and so it really is about growing yourself, growing your skill set and your knowledge and all that and your experience, but also growing the role. So when you leave a role, um, which is a very millennial thought, right? Like, what do you mean you leave a role? You're supposed to stay there forever. No, no, no. When you do leave a role, you want to leave it in better condition than where you found it, right? You want to set up the next person for success. So you grow yourself, you grow the role, and then you grow the community. What are you doing? What work are you doing that's actually benefiting and contributing to the community in very tangible ways too, right? Like, so I think that book, Every Good Endeavor, kind of helped me to develop that philosophy of how I approach work.
And I know we could do an entire another session just on leadership and strengths, and I feel like maybe we foresee something here in the future, having some of those conversations. Uh, awesome. Any other questions for Josué?
I have another one, RJ. Um,
Absolutely.
so um, I work with both students and alumni, and everyone's on their own path at their own pace. So I'm sure there's going to be some students listening now, or in the future. What advice would you give them to encourage them that they can be successful at WGU and aspire to whatever they want to do next?
Ooh, Dan, talk about a good closing question. Um, I mentioned earlier that the one of the biggest appeal of WGU for me was the ability to go at my own pace, right? And I didn't have to sit in a class, although there was one group project. But I didn't have to sit in a class, right? I didn't have to show up, fight for parking, and then run to a classroom. And so the ability to go at your own pace, your own, right? You can do it all on your own, with the help of mentors and stuff. Just because you can do it alone doesn't mean you should do it alone. And so, sure, you can just wrestle your way through your coursework, or you can reach out to the resources available to you. And I have to say, WGU, I went to a private university straight out of high school, and then I went to community college. And didn't work out both times. When I got to WGU, the number of resources available, not only available, but accessible, those are two different things. It's one thing to say you have this, you paid for this is part of your tuition. It's a whole other thing to say, like, okay, it's 2 clicks to actually get to it, right? If I want to meet with a course instructor, their availability, one, is mind blowing. Two, to book some time with them is super easy. And so do the easy thing so that you can do the hard thing, right? Book that time with your mentor, book that time with your instructor, book some time with, the librarian or there. I mean, there's so much there. There's so much there, and it's also well organized and designed that. And if you have trouble finding it, ask your mentor. Say, hey, can you just send me a link to book this, to schedule that, to research this, right? I mean, that's what they're there for, and that's what they do. One of the many things that they do well. So you can do it alone, but just because you can doesn't mean you should. If you find yourself struggling, that's usually a good signal that you need to bring somebody else into the conversation, and that someone is gonna hopefully show up with so much eagerness and enthusiasm to want to see you succeed, even after I've graduated. I mean, connecting with Diane, connecting with Alonzo, to see people that just really want what's best for you and want to see you successful, that they're there. Just reach out to them.
Any closing remarks that you wanted to make, Josué, and what might be the best way if people do have additional questions moving forward? Do you recommend connecting with you on LinkedIn? What might be the best way to get connected to you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably the easiest way. Find me on LinkedIn. And I don't know if you can throw the link in the chat or however, but just you can find me on LinkedIn. Um, I, any closing thoughts? I would say while it's a very tricky time to for any career, um, I would always just try to keep that perspective in mind and of you know we're not in it alone, right? And when you come to events like this, you get to hear from others and learn from others, and sometimes commiserate with others, right? So keep on staying connected with others, uh, because it takes a community to really get through some of these more difficult times. So find your community, stay connected with your WGU alumni, and just know that this isn't forever, right? Uh, um, this is just a moment in time.
Josué, thank you so much for taking the time to jump in here, share your story. Again, like it's going to be influential for a number of people, whether it's today or 6 months from now or a year from now when they end up watching this recordings, and then just sharing your insight and some of those things that you had touched on as far as just leadership, I think is huge, and then really impacting your community. But thank you for jumping on with us. We certainly appreciate. And Diane, thank you for recommending him. He has been fantastic.
No, thank you guys so much. I've had a lot of fun.
Awesome. All right, everyone, have a fantastic rest of your day. And then this is just one of the sessions that we were hosting. 2 more today, 2 more later this week. So make sure to catch those, and have a fantastic rest of your Tuesday. Take care. Thanks, Josué.